from me from Castle Goring. Nikki says, lots of love to everybody who says nice things about her. And I say thank you very much for the nice things you say about Nikki and about me. And also, thank you for all your comments. I have to say, several people pointed out to me that India actually did attend COP26 and that it was Russia and China that did not attend. I'm sorry, my research notes were incorrect, and for that I must apologize. And in fact, I gather that both the Chinese and the Russians sent delegations. Their presidents simply didn't attend. But then, nor did our head of state. She sent her heir and her heir in line from that heir in her stead. So I think if you look at it like that, it most likely made very little difference, because there is actually talk that maybe the whole thing has been a bit of a damp squib. I think it's actually a very worthwhile thing to some of our, to care for the environment is very, very valuable. In fact, it's invaluable. And there does need to be international agreement, and they made wonderful progress on the rainforests, and if only for that, it's been worthwhile. So putting that aside, I will say I absolutely hear the criticism about people, billionaires and presidents and people like that, flying in from all over the world on private jets and having gas-guzzling motorcades. Evidently, the American president had 30 cars and several planes, etc., etc., and he's just one of many. How necessary is it? Well, I think meetings of heads of state and government are, and traditionally have always been, of historic and political value. So to that extent, we can cut them a bit of slack. Do they really need that amount of excessive presence? It's a question worth asking. Al-Ain says, Dear Lady C, thank you very much for your most informative and entertaining videos. I refer my students of English to your channel. Woo, thank you. As a source of deep thoughts and beautiful, sophisticated language, both of which they can further use and refer to in their own English essays. Thank you very much. If I may interrupt at this point to say, several years ago after I left the jungle, I appeared on the Mike Reed show, and I think it was the English professor of the professor of English, I should say, to make it clear exactly what I mean. Professor of English language. And I think it was Ipswich University, who came up to me afterwards and said, oh, Lady Colin, I have to tell you, I told my students, start watching you on television. He said, because your command of the English is what everybody else's should be. And he said, and their homework was to look at you on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. So it's very flattering when people say things like that. It means a very great deal to me. Thank you very much. But anyway, to continue, please continue providing us with both and cover more issues on other important topics in addition to the royal family. I just love your interpretation of things. Exclamation mark. As you put it, I couldn't agree more with your position on Greta Thunberg. With every word. Thank you very much. Many people wrote in to say the same thing. Most of us here in Russia were surprised with the Western world's obsession with her. We only treated her actions as a fake and PR, nothing more. It's hard to believe, for me and the people I know, that someone big and adult took her seriously. I mean, protecting our planet is a serious cause, and it no doubt must be addressed, but not this way. With greetings from Russia, Alyona from St. Petersburg. Alyona from St. Petersburg. Tatiana Kuzmichova, who was, I think, the English professor of St. Petersburg University, and whom I had the pleasure of meeting through a dear friend of mine called Eugenie Visharenko, actually proposed that I be given a part-time professorship of English at St. Petersburg University. Nothing came of it, but it was lovely, and certainly I went and I saw the university, I saw the students, in deepest winter, by the way. I think it was in either January or February. So I was really impressed with the way you guys in Russia cope with winter, because it's really cold. But anyway, insofar as your observation is concerned, where Greta Thunberg is concerned, I hang my head in perplexity that the media are so dumb, stupid, and undiscerning that they can actually elevate a rather troubling and troubled, because she has been diagnosed with various personality disorders or problems, shall we say, that she has been promoted the way she has been. You know what's going to be her fate in 20 or 30 years from now. It's very troubling as a mother to look at her and think, what is her final outcome going to be when she is discarded on the scrap heap of celebrity, because she's no longer young and she is abrasive, and her message is one that some people can agree with, but it is also excessive. It is in some degrees indicative of a slightly irrational, obsessive and troubled personality. She is a mascot, and I don't like seeing the press use anybody, especially a troubled young woman. And her demeanour has been completely out of line and unacceptable in Glasgow. And her choice of language shows what a very limited vocabulary she has, but what tremendous issues she has with rage. Let's see how that all pans out. All I can say is I wouldn't want to be her psychiatrist or psychologist in 10 years from now, when they're trying to pick up the pieces, because I doubt very much it's going to end well. Jacob Waters says, "Good morning from Minnesota, dear Lady C. Though I have not followed closely the Epstein story particularly, as what I've read appears to be disgusting and very unsavoury, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. The whole thing is deeply, deeply unsavoury and disgusting. I've listened to your passionate take on the accusations against Prince Andrew, and I commend you for your fairness in responding to your followers' opinions on the subject. I do worry about the Queen, though. All of this having to cope with Prince Andrew's legal problems and also her grandson, Prince Harry, and his troublesome wife. I did listen to the Queen's video speech for the COP26, and Her Majesty did seem strong and astute. I was so glad how wonderful she presented herself. And do I agree? Yes, I do. There is no doubt the Queen is a woman of tremendous character and judgment. She has walked a tightrope for over 70 years, and she has never slipped. Is that not an accomplishment? Also, she is a strong character. She is quite a retiring personality in some ways, but she's very fun-loving and she is very connected to life. She is a life-enhancing personality. Is she troubled? You bet she's troubled. Does it bother everybody who cares for her? Yes, it does. But, you know, people of character understand that life isn't perfect. And they just get on with the business of living and doing their duty and making their lives as good as they can be and as fulfilling as they can be and get their happiness as and where they can. That is one of the cornerstones of sterling spiritual values. Not exploiting a situation, but dealing with a situation in such a way that you do it with heart and head and constructively. And you become stronger. Practice makes perfect. The Queen has practiced a lot, and she has perfected the art of living, and of living not only personally, but politically, and taking her pleasures and the goodness as and where they exist. Not skirting around the rest, but just not being bogged down by it. There are a lot of spiritual lessons to be learnt from the way the Queen conducts herself. And it's not because she is the Queen, it is because she is a woman who has sound and solid values and has put them to superb use. Nancy Turner says, funny how the very man whom Meghan and British Prince Harry encouraged the American people to vote for, threw the very policy she attempted to take credit for straight into the trash can, making a complete fool, big block capitals, out of her. Yes, it is funny, but you know they say a week is a long time in politics. And there's really very little loyalty amongst politicians. Meghan has been shaping up to be an overambitious embarrassment. In America, having succeeded to make it clear that that is precisely what she is in Britain and the Commonwealth. It's not a surprise that the President of the United States would actually think, let me put as much distance as I can between myself and this empty vessel. Joe Biden, whatever his failings, and I know a lot of people think he has many, is a consummate politician. He has been in the game for an awfully long time, and he has perfected his skills politically. Look at what he has survived, not only personally, in the death of his wife and children, but in terms, and also the trouble that his son Hunter has given him over the years. All of that is very difficult to survive. But to climb to the top of that greasy pole, the way he has done, and with the character and the traits and the limited talents that he has had, it takes a lot of focus, a lot of ambition, and a lot of political wile. Why wouldn't he throw her under the bus? Of course he did. Pam Duncan says, it's actually come out in the US, not sure if it's made it across the pond, that several of the Sussex's close neighbours have already sold their homes or have them on the market. Well, that I know to be true, and have moved out due to issues with the two of them, but mainly with the gold digger who is doing her best to command the neighbourhood association to do her bidding and demanding changes based on her supposed needs for more privacy and security. She actually wants continued stepped up street patrols, at least in the immediate area around her house. But since this would be patrols outside her property, she thinks that the neighbourhood association should pay for it, and she shouldn't. She has also been bothersome in the fact that she tends to drop by for a social call when it's obvious a neighbour is entertaining and she wants to attend. There have also been reports from some neighbours that she simply does not get along with them, from the aspect of just not being a good neighbour, such as not curbing her dogs and not picking up after them and having people deal with what she will not pick up. There are also a lot more alleged complaints being passed along by Sussex staff of how bossy she is and in a few instances abusive. The turnover is pretty high, as some shops say that if they meet a new staff member one week that holds a certain position, within 2 weeks they will meet the person who is that person's replacement. And this is one story from a neighbour who was interrupted during the evening with a frantic knocking to find a seemingly underage girl, frightened to death, saying that she had been kicked out of the house without any of her things and not even her purse, and she had no money to go home. He ended up seeing that she got home and later tried to talk to Harry about how things were not done in this way, as this sort of thing is disturbing. When he saw Harry out and bike riding, which is when he spoke to Harry, he was told by Harry that he must not speak about his wife like that again. Does not sound like it's a very pleasant neighbourhood anymore, nor a friendly workplace either. Have I heard similar things? Yes, I have. And I've read this out because this echoes quite a lot of what I have been told. There evidently is a discomforting turnover of staff. Meghan is very demanding. Harry goes along with it the way most weaklings go along with the antics of their stronger, dominating wives. I know it. I saw it with my parents. As my brother used to say about Daddy, Daddy has absolutely no character where money is concerned, and he certainly didn't. And Harry evidently has none either where Meghan is concerned. And just as how my father wasn't blind to mummy, I'm not so sure that Harry is really blind anymore. He would have been blinded and certainly stunned in the first and second instance. But now he'd have to be even dumber than the biggest idiot to not have got some hint as to what is going on. Yes, there are problems. They, however, have a plan. They will ultimately sell Montecito for a lot more money than they paid for it. That is their plan, evidently. They bought it on a mortgage. They will flip it at the first opportune moment when they can make a lot of money out of it. And they are, in the meantime, going to pretend that all is good in the Garden of Eden and that there are no asps there. Loads of apples, but no asps. They are clearing out the neighbourhood quicker than you can say boo, evidently. People have left. She is deeply unpopular. Nobody, with the exception of one couple who are also friendly with Ellen DeGeneres, wants to have anything to do with them. They are pariahs. They are as much pariahs in Montecito, evidently, and at least according to the reports I have heard from people who live in Montecito. And I'm speaking about people in the industry. So everybody can't be wrong. Or if they are, it begs the question, what is going on? Why is everybody wrong? I don't think everybody can be wrong. Yeah. I think we will hear a lot more stories along this line as time goes on. I suppose the whole thing's just very regrettable. My sympathies lie with the poor underlings. You know, when my mother decided she wanted to get rid of a member of staff, once she went power crazed, which she did, she would ensure that the police were called to put them out. This was a way of making sure that she didn't have to give them their severance pay and that they left as ignominiously as they possibly could. And this was a woman who knew better. And this was a woman who insisted that we treat the staff properly. But power-crazed people have to have their foot on someone's head. And there are so many reports that Meghan does not treat staff the way I would wish to treat staff, or wish if I were staff to be treated. That I'm afraid I believe everyone over Meghan's denials. Annette Ingle wants to know, why is Virginia not in prison with Maxwell? Very good question. The answer, insofar as I understand it, is that Virginia Giuffre is a very clever manipulator, and she is in bed with David Boys, not literally, but figuratively, who is in bed with President Clinton, and that most of the people who would be charging Virginia Roberts with the crimes that she, by her own admission, committed when she was procuring innocent girls, or even not so innocent, but certainly girls, for her boss, Jeffrey Epstein, she is so in bed with and protected by the Democrats, most of whom would be the ones who would be charging her with crimes. They're not going to charge her with crimes. No. The word on the street, it's actually not the street, the word in certain offices, legal offices, is that Virginia Roberts, if they charge her, she will sing like a bird about all of the politicians that she has dirt on, starting with President Bill Clinton. Now, do you see why Virginia Roberts has been able to make the vast fortune she's been able to make, and why the popular media have gone along with the fiction that she is a victim and not a perpetrator? They need to protect Bill Clinton and the other politicians of both ilks. But Epstein, although he was a pervert for all causes and didn't care which political spectrum you sat upon, as long as he could use you, he would use you. Most of his primary connections were in the Democratic Party. However, he had sufficient in the Republican Party that it's what's known as a Mexican standoff. Neither political party dares to draw the gun and shoot first in case they both kill each other. Does that explain to you why Virginia Giuffre is out having made tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, while Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison? Charming, charming. And I'm being very wry when I say it like that, because words cannot convey how deplorable I regard this situation as being. Maria Gibson says, Lady C, you seem to be more forgiving of Prince Charles's shortcomings than you are of Princess Diana's. I love your channel and enjoy tremendously, but on that point I do not agree with you. Maria Gibson, you don't have to agree with me. You're entitled to your opinion and I'm entitled to mine, but I will tell you why I am more, and I wouldn't have said forgiving, but if you want to say forgiving, I'm not going to quibble. Why I'm more forgiving of Charles's foibles than Diana's? Charles never set out to destroy Diana. When the marriage didn't work, Charles went out of his way, and this I've heard from Diana herself. So anybody who wishes to dispute it, save your breath. You don't know as much as I do, and I heard it from Diana herself, so you can take it as fact. Charles, when the marriage broke down, was a very accommodating and understanding husband. She would go north, he would go south. He even used to allow her to entertain her lover, James Hewitt, at Highgrove House, and to teach his sons riding. That is not a harsh, a punitive, an aggressive, or a nasty husband. Diana could be very understanding, sophisticated, and accommodating as well. And then, when there was a gap in her life, usually when some affair hadn't worked out, she would turn the fusillade of vengeance on Charles. And that which was not his fault all of a sudden became his fault. She even tried to get him stripped of his right of succession to the throne. I'm sorry, no matter how bad the marriage was and why it didn't work out, that, as far as I was concerned, was a bridge too far. Vengeance and destructiveness and maliciousness to that degree is inexcusable under all circumstances, as far as I am concerned. My ex-husband did far worse things to me than either Charles did to Diana or Diana did to Charles. Well, actually, they actually might be on a close run thing in terms of what Diana did to Charles, because my ex-husband tried to destroy my life the way Diana tried to destroy Charles's life, but he did it far more effectively because I didn't have the backup and support of a royal family, nor did I have the backup and support of a lot of the press in this country. He used the press against me. Did I set out to destroy him? No. I actually set out to, insofar as it was possible, preserve his dignity and to keep the truth out of the public arena. He's the one who forced the issue by selling lies about me repeatedly to the newspapers that forced me to ultimately sue them. And at first I didn't even sue him. It was only after 20 years of constant abuse that I then sued him. So, if I've lived through it and wasn't vengeful, why would I cut Diana any slack for being as vengeful as she was when it was unjust? And even if it had been just, it was still unjustifiable. Do I make myself clear? I hope I do. I have a lot of sympathy for the Prince of Wales. I think he has been given a very rough ride by Diana and the press. I also know from my own personal experience, in terms of being Diana's biographer, how Diana deliberately, for her selfish reasons and her malicious reasons, tried to destroy his life. I'm sorry. I think it was unforgivable. Fortunately, I didn't need to forgive her, but he did. Doesn't that say something about him? Anne Lorenz says, if Has's wife didn't expect crowds in New York City, why on earth did they need the huge troop? And she spells troop, T-R-O-U-P-E, then says, in brackets, I say troop, T-R-O-U-P-E, rather than troop, T-R-O-U-P-E. ROOP, because I wouldn't be surprised if they were all just actors, exclamation mark, close brackets, of security guards with them. What a stupid spectacle. On the contrary, Anne Lorenz, it was a very carefully calculated and calibrated manipulation of public perception. If they had done what the Queen normally does, and shows up with just one private detective and a press secretary or a lady-in-waiting, they would not have been able to announce to the world how important they are. The way arrivists and self-aggrandizing and self-promoting individuals nowadays announce their importance to the world is by the size of their security. They've got to have a lot of security, because if they don't have a lot of security, everybody isn't going to know they're important. So the bigger the security team, the more important they are, because everybody's after them. Well, of course, nobody's after either Harry or Meghan. So maybe for paparazzi pictures, half the time, which they set up themselves, but otherwise, no. But it wasn't a stupid spectacle. It was a deliberate and calculated spectacle, so that when the photographs of them were taken, there would be a buffer between them and the non-existent public, so that the cameras would be photographing, catching snapshots, or getting videos where the screen was filled to capacity with all sorts of security. Does it make sense now? It should. Gail UK 71 says, Dearest Lady C, I'm a new fan of your channel, which manages to be both informative and entertaining. A tricky balance to strike these days. Thank you very much. That's what I aim for. Forgive me if you have been asked this question before, but I was wondering, from your knowledge of Diana, what is your opinion of what she would have really thought of Harry's desertion of his birth family? That is a really good question. And the answer is, it was always impossible to predict what Diana would say, think, or do, because she herself half the time didn't know what she was going to say, think, or do until she did it. Depending on her mood, she would have had one or another response. My suspicion is that she would have had very mixed feelings, and she was extremely emotional and not always rational. So some of those emotional responses might well have been perplexing. But I suspect that she would have seen enough synchronicity between the aims that she had set out to achieve, because she, having left the royal family, was setting herself up as Mother Teresa in a tiara. She was doing it with Mohammed Fayed's money. Dodi and her romance wasn't only about love and lust. It was also about that the Fayed money would have been the vehicle which would have taken her to her destination as the greatest humanitarian that had ever existed. This was her ambition. She was speaking with Mohammed Fayed about setting up an international entity. And he, I have to tell you, had been very active in charity work over the decades, which was one of his virtues that has remained unsung throughout all of the rather distasteful matters that have taken place. So she, I think, would have thought, because of course we don't know whether she would have succeeded or not, and whether she would have succeeded or not would have certainly impacted upon her viewpoint where Harry and Meghan's humanitarian forays were concerned. But their overblown humanitarian forays have elements of Diana. Sorry for those of you who liked Diana and don't want to hear the truth, but that is the fact. Diana's landmine campaign, for which she got so much credit, infuriated the government because it nearly derailed an international agreement with landmines that was already in place. She got a lot of kudos for it, but she got no popularity in political circles. Diana, of course, left the royal family. Diana wasn't born into the royal family. Diana was a wife. Wives, for good or ill in our world, are expendable. Harry was born into the royal family. That is a link from birth which cannot be severed. Diana was free to leave. Harry chose to leave. Diana wanted to leave to have her own life. And it has to be said, to retain all the privileges and the advantages of being royal. Harry has tried to do the same. What would her opinion have been? Who knows? I don't think she would have had a fixed opinion. I think her opinion would have changed with the circumstances. I hope that answers the question. Ilona Carl says, Lady C, what do you think? Why Prince Harry and Meghan, every little positive thing they do is advertised to the whole world? In my humble opinion, from a healthcare professional's point of view, it's insecurity, deep down insecurity, which requires the person to advertise anything they do to get approval, because it makes them feel good. Any little criticism they perceive as an attack, hate and keep responding, fighting back. The world pokes, they jump. They both seem to have that insecurity, so it doubles up. There is not one person to ground them. None had a stable family life. Both struggled with depression and self-esteem issues. Both struggled to be number one and A. Neither was. Now they have both doubled their will to go up, but they have also doubled their insecurities. How will this unfold? I have no idea. What are your thoughts, Lady C? Ilona Carl, you have in pedestrian language, and you are commended for this, by the way, described the underlying issue with narcissism. Narcissists are basically and originally very insecure. They basically don't like themselves, but to compensate, they overcompensate and end up requiring constant adoration. Do they solve the problems of their insecurities? No, because they are bottomless pits that no matter how many pennies you drop in, it never reaches water level. That's just the problem with them. They are basically very empty, destroyed in some ways, human beings, because of their insecurity. But sympathise with them at your peril, because you can sympathise with the fact that they have these flaws, but any sympathy you give them will be perverted against you and to their ultimate benefit, because that is the name of their game. And yes, I agree, both Harry and Meghan have insecurities that they have covered with arrogance. Both of them know that they are inadequate for their ambitions. And this is what it's all about. Their greed for self and external approbation, their overinflated sense of importance and of their rather paltry attributes means that they are set up for failure at every turn, because you cannot succeed when you are an overblown egotist, because your ego will always get in the way of your accomplishments. I don't think there is any solution for either of them. And yes, I think the two of them together have increased exponentially the flaws in each. It's called a folie à deux. Sherry Davidson says, Dear Lady C, thank you for the fascinating stories about the people on your family tree. I found it so interesting. On another topic, did I understand you correctly from a previous video that narcissists have great self-love? It would seem that with all the pretending and pretense, boasting and bragging, varnishing of image, creation of drama and enemies and attention-seeking, that she, Meghan, feels empty inside, lacks healthy ego strength and even hates herself, whatever she perceives her true self to be. And if that is in some measure true, should I have compassion for someone with no lights on inside, who works so furiously to light up a facade? Or is there just too much destruction from the personality to merit it? Sad for the children to be exposed to such a warped and superficial view of others. Again, brilliant question, brilliant observations. You know, if you have a heart and you're dealing with a narcissist, they suck you in even when you know what they are. My mother used to suck us in. Let me speak for myself. She used to suck me in. And I used to sympathise with her. Every ounce of sympathy was converted into a pound of destructiveness. You cannot afford to sympathise with a narcissist. No matter what you give them, they pervert it. They turn it into something that it shouldn't be and into something that is destructive. The only way to cope with a narcissist is to have as little to do with him or her as possible. And if you can get away with it, have nothing to do with him or her. I took the view that my mother was my mother, but I was not prepared to be destroyed by her, and for virtually 20 years I saw practically nothing of her and exchanged the barest minimum of words. it was only after I got my children that I thought they need grandparents, and I saw that she had been, whatever her failings as a mother, she had been a pretty cool, as the kids would say, grandparent. So I thought, I'm going to do this for my kids, and I don't regret having done it for my kids. I then had the dilemma, once I was involved with her, how I was going to cope without being devoured and used and abused and misused by her. Because narcissists use, abuse and misuse every single person in their life. We are not human beings. We don't have feelings where they're concerned. We are not human. They have no empathy. We are tools to be used. We are fish in the sea for the shark to swallow. It's very difficult, unless you are a narcissist, to maintain a level of emotional distance that prevents you and protects you from being devoured. So you get devoured, you get sucked in, you get hurt, and then you pull away. Dealing with a narcissist is always a very difficult and trying task, and it is best done at a great distance, or preferably not at all. But life requires at times that we have to deal with people like that. And I would say, sup with the devil at your peril. And if you have to, use a very long spoon. And on that note, I hope this has been of interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, please keep the questions coming in. This can't be done without you. God bless and goodbye.